Congressman Mulvaney, good to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Mr. Spicer, it's always a pleasure.
All right, see, here's the beautiful thing. You've done the White House thing. You were the head of OMB and you're a congressman. So we're going to get it from all sides today. Just walk me through. I mean, here's what I want people to understand. When you look at this, if you just read the media, it's like, oh, why are we doing this? And then when you go look at these tariff rates, some would say, why did we get ourselves into this situation in the first place? Why did we allow these tariff rates to be higher for our manufacturers, service providers, ranchers, farmers to get into X country, and ours were so low? Why did that happen?
Yeah, we did that as part of a soft power foreign policy for the last 50 or 60 years. That it was a way to build friends back in the Cold War, a way to sort of present a counterbalance to what Russia was trying to do around the world. So we try to use trade for foreign policy. Now, that changed a little bit, that the rationale changed a little bit when we got into NAFTA, when free trade and globalism and all those types of things where, in my mind, it was driven in large part by Wall Street that made a lot of money, but saw the end of a lot of American domestic businesses. I'm from the South, as you know, and I'm in textile country, and no one's in that business anymore. It destroyed an entire part of our economy. So look, there's a lot of reasons we got there. There's, one really good reason to get out of it, which is it is holding us back. So that part of what Trump is doing, I applaud. I think it's been far too long coming.
Do you think people in South Carolina believe that textiles can be brought back? Can we manufacture, or is that industry gone? I mean, because I guess part of what the White House is saying is, well, we want to onshore stuff, but is textiles one of those things that could be onshored again?
Yes and no. There are certain things that are probably never coming back because they're too labor intensive. And if you're paying somebody $2 a day to work in Vietnam, you're not going to be able to compete. But there are places where American textiles have done extraordinarily well, and they continue to be hampered by these overseas trade barriers and tariffs and so forth. So the answer is depends, right? The real simple stuff, the basic low value add stuff is probably not coming back, but there are opportunities that we've left on the table over the course of the last decades because of our trade policies.
So putting on your member of Congress hat for a second.
Yeah.
Right now, there's a lot of these members that are saying, Congress and constitutionally does have the actual role of trade negotiations. The president kind of mocked it last night. I will admit that as a former assistant U.S. trade rep, I get it, which is, do you really want 435 people negotiating a trade deal? But there's people in Congress that are clearly frustrated. I mean, is that just for show?
No, they're hearing about it back home. I mean, they're hearing about it from folks with the stock. Listen, anytime the stock market goes down by 10% in a couple of days, members of Congress, especially when it's related to a domestic policy like this is, members of Congress are going to hear about it. They're also going to hear about it from their business people who are trying to figure out, what the uncertainties are. What are our prices going to be, Mr. Congressman, if I'm buying stuff today from Canada? And that's who they know to reach out to as a member of Congress. That's part of the job, right? You are supposed to represent the people when you're in the House. So it's what you're supposed to be doing. So no, it doesn't surprise me they're getting the calls at all. Doesn't surprise me they're talking about taking some authority back. I think that's a bigger conversation, Sean. What the president is doing is legal. He's using authority given to him by Congress, by law. Congress could change that law if they wanted to and get the president to sign it or do it, over a veto or something like that. But it doesn't surprise me that there's a little bit of tension between the branches of government. That's the way our system is set up.
So there's this, the president keeps saying that these countries are paying these tariffs or whatever. And then I saw a story out this morning that said an iPhone could cost as much as $2,500 by Memorial Day, and that they were literally flying 5 full plane loads of iPhones into the country to get ahead of the tariffs because they didn't want them on a boat because obviously they wouldn't make it in time before that deadline last night. Once consumers start seeing that, right? I mean, if you not even just want to upgrade your iPhone, if you break it and you go, gosh, I got to get a new one. Now something that was, $900 or $1,000 is $2,500. How is this? I just don't, to me, I think that's where the White House is going to have a problem, is when people start saying, I'm with you. I get it. That's not fair. But why am I now paying twice as much for an iPhone or a TV or whatever?
No, you're right. And if the White House has sort of dropped the ball on anything, I think it's preparing people for what you've just said. I don't think you drop them in the middle of a trade war without preparing them. and they have to know that things are going to be more expensive. Now, they're not going to be as expensive as a lot of people say. If there's $100 worth of tariff, Sean, that doesn't mean that the price of the product is going to go up by $100. It does go up. Some of that will get eaten by the manufacturers. Some of it will get eaten by the retailer. Some of it will be the impact will be lessened by the typical changes in currencies that happen when you put tariffs on. But prices are going to go up, and people are going to be upset. You're absolutely right. Why did Donald Trump win the election as convincingly as he did? Because people were upset about the economy. And if he loses the high ground on the economy, that's a real trouble, not just for him, because he's not running again, despite what the left says, but for the Republicans in the House and the Senate. That's what they're worried about. People vote their pocketbooks, and Donald Trump is not going to have a lot of time for this policy to sort of reap benefits if it's going to impact the midterm elections.
I think most people, I'm a champion of what he's saying. I believe, I agree. The soft power from decades ago, when we were fighting the Soviet Union, we wanted people to do business with us. We wanted to have a relationship with us. Those days are gone. But then the White House, so Trump's been clear for like 5 decades, reciprocity, like we should get what they get, et cetera. I get that part. But then I think what the White House did is they went out and started talking about deficit reduction, and we're going to have these tariffs. They're going to bring in more money. And then, oh, by the way, we're going to onshore stuff. They have 3 things. 1, lower the tariff, 100% on board on that. 2, reduce the deficit. Well, in order to do that, that means you have to keep the tariff in place. Therefore, you couldn't do number 1. And then number 3 is to onshore. And again, if you make number 1 happen, it makes it harder to make a company want to come back. Yes,
That's
there's
right.
some additional.
Yeah.
So that seems to be fundamentally. Now put your chief of staff hat back on, because it seems to me that you've got these factions in the White House, staff-wise, that are telling the president, oh, we can use it for this, we can use it for this, we can use it for that. And they're not clear on what the ultimate goal is.
No, listen, if you're asking me if I'm chief of staff, what am I telling the president? It would have been to fire Peter Navarro a long time ago, knowing that he's not going to fire Peter because Peter went to jail for him, to bury Peter someplace in the EOB so he can't do any more harm. What you just said is absolutely right, by the way, and it's been made worse by statements by folks like Peter. Peter's the one who came out and said, we're going to raise $6 trillion from these tariffs. No, you're not. That's simply not possible. Mathematically, that's never, ever going to happen, but it sort of raises expectations. What's rule number 1 in politics, Sean? Don't overpromise and underdeliver. And what some people in the White House, specifically Peter Navarro, have trying to convince people is you can use tariffs to raise a bunch of money and lower tariffs with other countries and rebuild American manufacturing. You can't do all of those things. Either you leave the tariffs in place forever and you hope that they raise a lot of money and you hope they rebuild manufacturing, or you use them as negotiations to get the 0 tariff deal. By the way, I think that's where Donald Trump is. You remember back in 2018 when he was in Canada at the G7 and the Europeans were giving him such a hard time about his threatened tariffs at that time. And he looked at them and said, how about 0, 0, 0? No tariffs, no non-tariff barriers, no subsidies. We just trade fair and square. Let's go. And of course, the Europeans wet themselves because they're not capable of doing that. I think that's where Trump probably is in his mind. He just wants a fair playing field on which we can compete.
100%. I think that's where his head is at. You brought up Peter Navarro. Where do you, of the 3 things that I laid out, what does he want? Or does he want all 3?
He wants all 3 and believes that you can have them. Keep in mind, the only person that I saw, and you and I follow this fairly closely, the only person of any import that I saw saying that the tariffs are going to raise $6 trillion was Peter Navarro. The very next day, Kevin Hassett, who is no dummy, okay, Hassett, he's the head of the CEA, right? Hassett came out and said, no, we think we'll get $6 trillion worth of investment because of tariffs. And Trump said the same thing. So it's only Navarro out there pitching this BS about how you can have tariffs fix everything in the whole world. Would I fire him? Sure, I would have fired him, but I would have fired him after the Ron Vara thing back in 2019.
But was he arguing the same thing in the first term? Was he arguing to get all 3? Because I only heard the onshoring. I mean the trade piece, and it's funny because I do wonder how much. So it seems to me though the interesting thing going back to the messaging is the president said, okay, you guys have a high tariff. We have basically none. I want these negotiations to occur, right? And then you immediately saw countries, Vietnam, Israel, Malaysia, reaching out and saying, okay, we want a deal. South Korea saying that we want a deal. Japan saying we want a deal. What the president, to me, politically speaking, would be smart to put these wins on the board. We got to deal with this. They took their thing down.
Now that's you and me, the former staffers, going to the boss today, say, listen, we need a win. With Wall Street is no longer.
But isn't that where his head is, Mick? I mean, that's the thing.
I think so. And Wall Street is not listening anymore. Wall Street was turning on every word. Now I think they're looking for action, and I think he needs to put a win on the board, and not with Zimbabwe. I'm talking about some with South Korea, Japan, something significant to prove to people what this is all about, which is leveling the playing field so that American firms can compete on the world stage fairly. I think that's what Donald Trump wants, and if he plays it smart, and I think he's going to, that's what he's going to get.
I agree. I mean, my opinion is, if I were him, look, I've had this list all week long, right? You know, they've got Thailand 72%. I mean, I know you mentioned a couple of other ones, but Bangladesh 74, Israel 33, whatever, Australia 10, Pakistan 10. Why not just come out with a list and say, hey, I get the non-tariff barrier, by the way. I mean, that's a huge impediment to us selling cars in like South Korea and in the EU. But if you can say I got all these tariffs lowered, I think that's a huge win. And I would just take
a huge win, and the economy would boom. Look, I think a lot of what they're doing is the right move. I think it's the messaging, and again, I come back to Navarro screwing up the messaging, because that what they're doing can have huge benefits, and you add to it the deregulation and hopefully tax policy, and you're talking about all the benefits we had in Trump 1.0 multiplied by several powers.
Okay, so right now you're back in the chief of staff role. You go to him and say, Mr. President, politically, we're able to get your wins, right? And the economy will rebound, the stock market will rebound. That's where you would have him right now.
Yeah, China, I'd put in a separate category.
Okay, I want to get to that, though.
Yeah, there are geopolitical reasons to treat China differently. But when Israel comes in and says, look, we're going to take all our tariffs to zero, take a win. I mean, that is a huge win. You're right on non-tariff barriers. I mean, if it's zero tariff, but it takes 6 months to get a container through Israeli customs, that is a problem. If it's zero tariffs, but they've got safety checks, bizarre safety checks on American cars in South Korea, that's a problem. You got to work through those things, but you can work through them. He's got the leverage now to do that. Yeah, I'd be telling to put a win on the board, and I think that would calm the markets and also help the Republicans as we move closer to the midterms.
All right, so you brought it up. I look at the world and then China, right? And now China, we're talking about 104% tariff as of last night. Okay, they're going to retaliate against us, and every cheap thing that we get from China is going to get more expensive. Now, just to be clear, I'm kind of okay with this. I feel like we need to break away from China a lot. I'm not sure this is the right way to do it, but explain what you mean when you say that China's got to be separate.
Yeah, there's just a bunch of geopolitical reasons for treating China differently. They steal our IP. They treat our investment very, very poorly. You have to do joint ventures. They don't act like a leading country of the world. Go outside of economics. One of the biggest frustrations I had when I was in the White House in the beginning of COVID was we couldn't get any information out of the Chinese. If that pandemic had started in, say, Argentina would have said, look, please, everybody come take a look. Help us figure out what the heck is going on. China did the exact opposite, and the world sort of muddled through it for this first several months because China wasn't acting like a leading country of the world. And as long as they're going to act like that, act like, dare I say it, a communist nation, which is what they are, you have to treat them like that. We beat the Soviet Union without firing a single shot because we knew how to deal with communist nations. Why we treat China any different, I have no idea. So
isn't it because they own part of our debt? I mean, like I think
debt. No, it's not, Sean. It's because Buick makes a lot of money in China. Blackstone makes a lot of money in China. Wall Street makes a lot of money in China. We never made that in Russia. Pepsi might have made a penny in China, but that's about it. No, this is Wall Street more than anything else.
So he cares about that. So I mean, or he does. I mean,
I think Trump is willing to. I think the tariffs, 100% tariffs, have shown that he's willing to treat China differently. I mean, I think that's the highest.
How did we walk this back? I mean, not walk it back, but how do we get a deal? Because I don't think that China looks like that they're looking. You know, every other country's going, please, sir, can we meet with you for 5 minutes and get a deal? China's basically like, screw you, we're raising our tariff.
Fine, let them. Listen. I would love to see, and I pitched this back in 2017. With Gary Cohn when we were in the White House together, and I still think it was the right plan of action. Mr. President, why are we picking a fight with the whole world when really China's the problem? Why don't we instead bring all of the world together to team up on China economically. By the way, that card can still be played. After he
Yeah.
cuts all of his deals with all these countries around the world and everybody's at 0 and 0 0, we're all friends again, that might be a good time to go. And now is the time to fix China. Germany knows it's a problem. France knows it's a problem. Brazil knows they're a problem. Japan knows they're a problem. China is a problem. Everybody knows it. And it'd be a great thing for us to sort of rally the world to try and fix that problem.
And I agree with that, because here's the one thing I do am concerned about, which is, does this action push China or push Europe into China's arms by China kind of doing what they did with Huawei, which is, all right, the United States doesn't want to play ball. We'll give you our cheap stuff, Europe.
Well, I think that's a great question. I mean, there's another hour-long conversation for another show. Is Europe, and I'm taking the British out of this, and maybe the Eastern Europeans. So let's say Europe really is Germany, France, Italy to a lesser extent, the northern, Denmark, Netherlands, etc. Are they reliable partners? Are they ever going to be able to stand up to China? If China invades Taiwan tomorrow, will Germany be able to do to China what we've all done to Ukraine in terms of economics? I don't think so. I don't think they can. And I don't know if they're a reliable partner going forward. Keep in mind, the next generation of European leaders thinks the most important issue facing the world is climate change. Are those people you can really count on to sort of be a counterbalance to China? Maybe not. Maybe that is what's sort of colored Donald Trump's approach to Ukraine, of course, over the course of the last several months. It's a fascinating discussion to have, and it's not going to end with tariffs.
All right, Mick, kind of one last thing I want to cover with you. The House is trying to deal with the Senate budget bill right now.
Yeah.
I was over at the White House. I saw Chip Roy and a couple of these other guys. They don't look like they're ready to back down. I think this is going to be Johnson and Trump always get the bill over the finish line, and I would always bet with them. This time feels different. I don't get the sense. I think they've been jammed with the Senate bill that's got a lot more debt and not as much savings. I don't know that this is going to happen this time.
I share that concern. I was on the Hill yesterday talking to some friends of mine, middle level folks, right? Folks, everybody knows Chip Roy. Chip Roy's clearly going to be part of the conversation, and he should be. But I'm talking about folks that most folks wouldn't know. Members of Congress who came up to me yesterday at lunch and said, look, Mick, am I wrong in thinking the Senate deal is a terrible deal? I mean, it's clearly filtered down just below much more than just the folks who are in the news every night for being fiscal conservatives. There's a lot of Republicans concerned in the House about that Senate bill. I think it's going to be a real challenge. Make it clear, everybody is aligned on wanting to extend the tax bill. It's a question of how much money do you want to try and save at the same time. It looks like the Senate doesn't want to save hardly any, and that is rubbing a lot of Republicans in the House the wrong way, not just the names you see in the news.
So how would you, again, let's go back to take the member of Congress hat, put it back to the White House. As the Freedom Caucus guy, how do you then message to the House guys, hey, this is like, I need you to be on this vote just because we need to get to that phase? I understand their concern. I go, there's not a ton of reassurance that we're going to get any savings.
My bias here is towards the House. As a former House member, I hate the Senate. I just do as an institution. All sorts of, when the Republic fails, it would be because of the Senate. But when I put my chief of staff back hat out, and what I'm asking the president to do is, Mr. President, look, I think you're going to have more luck getting the Senate to move towards the House's position than you are getting the House to move towards the Senate position. House members tend to be a little more skittish because they do have to run every 2 years, but you still got a lot of credibility, a lot of political capital in the Senate. That the $4 billion number they threw up there that's going to be a problem. I think we need to work on the Senate more than the House.
And so is that a John Thune issue? Why wouldn't you? I mean, to me, that was a lame, low number. Like,
because the Senate doesn't want to save any money. I mean, that's not how Washington is wired. Fiscal conservatives are in the small minority in this town. Okay, the Senate wants to get a tax deal. We all want to get a tax deal, but getting the Senate to actually spend less money one year to the next would be a Herculean type of effort. Can Donald Trump get it done? Yes, he can. Is there still a chance it gets done? Yes, it is, but it's really, really hard. They're simply pre-wired to spend money.
Mick Mulvaney, former OMB director, former White House chief of staff, former congressman from South Carolina. Thanks for sharing your time with us today.
Good to be here. Thanks, Sean.
Thank you.
Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.